There are an endless amount of issues that affect agriculture at the national level. Today I want to bring to your attention a few of the issues we'll be discussing more in depth during the policy development conference calls and webinars. These issues are areas that have been identified as rising on the national level. The first is the Renewable Fuel Standard, an issue that continues to divide agriculture. A bit of a background. The Renewable Fuel Standard, known as the RFS, was created by the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and greatly expanded under the Energy Security and Independence Act of 2007, which created the RFS-2. The RFS-2 sets targets and timetables for 4 categories of biofuels to be added into the nation's transportation fuel supply. These include conventional biofuels, which is the corn-based ethanol, biodiesel, cellulosic biofuels, and undifferentiated advanced biofuels. Since almost the day the bill was passed, gasoline consumption in the United States has decreased. We now consume the same amount of gasoline in the United States as we did in 2003, and this is expected to continue to decline over the next few years. This is important because U.S. gasoline consumption determines what is often referred to as the ethanol blend wall. Consequently, the gap between the 10% ethanol mandate and the RFS-2 mandate is expected to continue to grow because projections of gasoline consumption are declining while the mandate is increasing. The issue surrounding the RFS at this time is whether or not the obligated refiners will have enough renewable identification numbers, known as RINs, to satisfy the increased RFS-2 mandate in 2014, when the mandate will be rising from 13.8 billion gallons to 14.4 billion gallons. Current Farm Bureau policy supports the RFS-2 as passed in the Energy Security and Independence Act of 2007. As we continue to discuss this item during the policy development process, I want to bring a few questions to your attention for you to ponder over the next few weeks. With keeping the integrity of the RFS-2 as an American Farm Bureau priority issue for 2013, what alternatives or actions should Farm Bureau support as this issue takes center stage? What are the impacts on farmers, ranchers, and stakeholders of renewable fuels if the RFS-2 is changed or modified to avoid the blend wall? If the RFS-2 were or must be changed to avoid this blend wall, what should these changes entail? Another issue that not only affects farmers and ranchers across this country, but also covers nearly every economic activity, including home building, road construction, and mining, is the Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act, known as the ESA, was enacted in 1973, and over its nearly 40-year history has been known as one of the most sweeping, and if not to some, the most influential environmental statute. The challenge for farmers and ranchers is that administration and enforcement of this law has changed over the decades as activists continue to turn to the court system as a means of driving public policy. As these lawsuits have flourished, the Fish and Wildlife Service has spent more time and money on litigation instead of focusing on pragmatic activities. This has meant fewer resources for the agency to devote to activities like technical assistance for landowners and creating voluntary science-based approaches to preserving species. Over the years, efforts have been made to change and reform the Endangered Species Act so that it respects the rights and livelihoods of landowners while still pursuing the goals of protecting threatened or endangered species. Current Farm Bureau policy states that we believe that species can be more adequately protected by providing incentives to private landowners and public users rather than by imposing land use restrictions and penalties. Other key aspects of our current policy include compensation to landowners for the loss of use of their property resulting from implementation of the ESA, the right of landowners to protect person and property from listed predators and wildlife, and support of habitat conservation plans that are voluntary with landowners, oppose no additional requirements if new species are listed, and assurances that landowners abiding by them shall not be found in violation of the Endangered Species Act. As we continue to look at the consequences of the Endangered Species Act, I ask that you ponder the following questions. Should the Endangered Species Act be reformed to reflect a more flexible, less restrictive process that places greater emphasis on technical assistance for the regulated community, particularly landowners? Should science-based, quantifiable performance measures be built into species recovery plans? And should the Fish and Wildlife Service resources be targeted more towards cooperative conservation or mitigation agreements with landowners? The next issue I'd like to bring to your attention is one that current Farm Bureau policy does not address. This deals with proprietary information generated from precision agriculture technologies. Current and future technology allows for agronomic specialists to provide more site-specific advice, and plant breeders will learn more about their genetics as they respond to specific soil types, microclimate, and cultural practices. Other technology allows companies to offer real-time yield estimates of USDA final yield projections based on harvest monitored data. While this technology offers both great risk and reward, a discussion is warranted to discuss the effects and opportunities within this growing area. While improved technology has the potential to help farmers become more profitable, have we ensured that the information provided to those companies is secure? Will there be confidentiality clauses included in each contract that protects the farmer as much as the company? Even if there are adequate confidentiality clauses, is there a concern that one or more of these companies might use the data they collect in aggregate to take advantage of that market knowledge, whether through pricing for inputs and machinery or in the commodity markets? How can we ensure that this does not happen? If farmers are indeed providing data to a third party, should producers be paid for that information? Is there a role for Farm Bureau to ensure that sensitive information like soil fertility, yields, and production practices, as well as personal or enterprise-specific information, is protected? Do the benefits of this technology outweigh the potential dangers? The continuing growth of this technology calls for a continuing discussion regarding our role and policy moving forward. The last issue I want to talk to you about today is by no means a new area: raw milk. After much debate, a large majority of the delegates to the 2013 American Farm Bureau annual meeting approved new policy language in support of only pasteurized milk and milk products being sold or distributed for human consumption. Most of the discussion in favor of this policy centered around the public safety risk posed by consumption of raw milk. States currently have the authority to govern the sale of raw milk within their boundaries. Because AFBF policies only focus on the national level, interstate regulation is not affected. Although raw milk is currently not subject to any national legislative or regulatory action, it's a topic that warrants further discussion. Should state programs that inspect and provide for the sale of raw milk and milk products within the state and clearly labeled with acknowledged food safety risks be addressed in and allowed by American Farm Bureau policy? Should AFBF policy language that specifically opposes raw milk for human consumption be further clarified to stipulate that it only applies to national and interstate sales of milk and milk products? Recognizing that both the Centers for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration consider pasteurization necessary for food safety reasons, should the current language be retained? I'm looking forward to discussing these issues and others during the upcoming policy development process. The greatest strength of Farm Bureau is that each and every policy starts at the county level. It's a true example of grassroots policy. I encourage you to take a look at our policy, both on the state and federal levels, and become involved in the resolutions process in order that we have policy that most effectively represents farmers and ranchers.